Today's guest is Dara Salas, and Dara is 47 and she's in a transition state, I would say, which is one of the reasons I was excited to have her on because she's kind of she knows her purpose, she has a mission, but she's still figuring out and in the implementation phase. And she says she's ever evolving, which I love. We should all have that aspect and that mentality. But she has coming into the online space and beginning to use her expertise to help teens and their parents, of course, with learn how to be financially responsible, which I think a lot of our population, a lot of the people in this world need, me included, because I was a mess. I tell you a little bit about my parents in this episode and what I learned from them. So, yeah, we could all benefit from that. And we really don't learn it. We learn how to add and subtract, we learn our multiplication tables, but do we really learn how to manage our money? No. So, Dara is on a mission and she has overcome so much from her past. She had a very depressed dad that she lived with. And if it wasn't for her grandmother, she talks about how her grandmother was a great mentor to her, a great example, and showed her true love. And I think that's what, people who love us unconditionally, everybody needs just one person like that, because if they believe in us, we believe in ourselves. And she is such an example of that. And when she had her son and he started to grow up, she realized, I don't want my son to have the baggage that I had. I'm going to teach him differently. And we often want to do something different for our children than we will even do for ourselves. But she took it upon herself to learn and to get smart about finance and how to invest. And she's taught her son, who's now 16, how to do this. And now she wants to teach and make bigger impact out in the world. And so without any further ado, let's get to the episode now. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Not Your Average Lives. Today, I have Dara Salas with me, and I am very excited about Dara's story because it's a bit different than stories I've done thus far, because she's actually gotten lit up before the nest empties, which I think is a great plan. I don't know if that was coincidental, Dara, or if you planned that, but I will turn it over to her in a second. But she has a great backstory of dysfunction as a child. And what I love is she's taken that dysfunction and really broken the cycle, although she says she's ever evolving, which I love. And she is teaching her son how to really be mindful of his money. And I think every child should have that. And they don't teach enough of it, like you said in what you submitted to me. But I would love to know that story. And she's even she's creating a podcast that hasn't launched yet about that very subject. And I think it's going to involve her son. So I saw this picture of you and him side by side. So I think that'll be really, really neat to have him involved with that. So welcome to the show, Dara.
Thank you. Welcome. Thanks for welcoming. I'm sorry, I get nervous with these kinds of things.
That's okay.
But I wanted to first start off by saying thank you so much for the invitation to be on your podcast. It means the world to me to have an opportunity to share what it is that I have been through in my life.
Well, stories of inspiration are what I look for, and I can't wait for you to inspire.
Thank you very much. So just a little bit about me. My name is Dara Salas. I was born in Hawaii, but my family is from Guam. So if anyone knows anything about Guam, it's a really small, tight-knit community, very family-oriented. The thing that was different about my own personal upbringing is that I grew up in a very dysfunctional family, I would say. My parents divorced at a young age, and my father was going to live in one part of the world and my mother in another part of the world. And being the empathetic child that I was at that age, I didn't want either parent to be alone. And so I purposely went to go live with my dad. And that really started me down this journey of kind of parenting him a lot as he was, as I was the child, but he was going through a lot of personal issues.
And so give me a little bit more detail. So how old were you and where did you go with him?
So I was in the fourth grade when they finally broke up, separated for good.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mom took my younger sister and moved to Delaware. And I lived in Germany with my father, who was in the military.
Cool.
So
did you learn German?
Not really. I was really young. I think I learned a little bit, but I don't
Forgot
really
it.
remember much right now.
Yeah.
I think I remember like maybe like 2 or 3 words. But yeah, so my dad and I stayed in Germany. My mom moved on with my sister, and that just my father's mental health really just kind of deteriorated from that point. And he, got to the point where he was even suicidal. And so being young and impressionable and really seeing how my sister was really thriving with my mom, part of me longed to be with them. But then there's also that other part of you as a child that just wants your parents to be okay. And so even though that desire was there, I felt the need to be there for my dad at all times.
Yeah.
So a lot of my issues, I face as an adult, really stem from that time period.
Mm-hmm. You probably also were struck by the fact, it sounds to me like you took his behavior and that experience and decided you didn't want that for yourself.
Yeah. And you know what? My father and I had a very weird relationship. He was never physically abusive, but he was not emotionally there for me. He was so wrapped in his own grief.
Sure.
And then he would say things, like, if you weren't here, I wouldn't have any reason to live. And I don't know, now as an adult, sometimes you say things that maybe don't necessarily mean you're going to commit suicide. But when you're in the fourth grade, that's just what that's like, you take that seriously, like your parent doesn't want to live. And so for me, that really shaped a lot of the pain that I had in my heart. And so I would try to fill a void in his life. And then he was just never really involved in my school. And now as an adult, I understand why that is that he just couldn't deal with his own stuff. And
depressed.
So, yeah. And so now I can have empathy for him. And it's taken me all these years to really try to like fix our relationship because it really spiraled out of control. But that's.
And I can't remember if I said your age. So you're 47 and you're
okay. Yeah, I'm 47.
Talking about that. Yeah. So did you get to see your family very often or just holidays or how did that work?
So my mom and my sister, I saw them every few years.
Ooh.
And my mom got remarried and I had stepbrother and a half sister and they never really had much, like they were pretty poor, I would say. But they always had love. And my stepfather was so present for my sisters and my mom, and he treated my mother like a princess. And so part of me was always like, felt like I wanted that life. And, but for some reason that wasn't possible for me because there's no way I could, break my dad's heart even more than it was already broken.
Right.
But then as he got older, luckily he got remarried, he found somebody, but then it kind of shifted again from, I was that person who filled this hole in his heart to now I've been replaced. Right. So that was a whole another set of issues.
And how old were you then?
That was, I want to say a junior or senior in high school.
Okay. All right.
And at that point I was living with my grandmother who really saved my life. I wouldn't say saved my life because I was never like suicidal or anything like that, but she showed me what it felt like to be loved by somebody. That's the first time I ever really felt that, you know?
Yeah. Have you heard about the movie Hillbill Elegy?
I have not.
Okay, so it's a brand new movie where I think it's on Netflix. I haven't seen it, but I've seen trailers and I saw the guy who wrote it, and it's based on him and his life. But
Mm-hmm.
Glenn Close is the grandmother, and she plays. It's like you don't even can't even tell it's Glenn Close, but it's that it's uh the setting is, I think they're kind of in the Appalachian, area, and they're very, very poor, and kind of it's their lives are wrapped around poverty and drug use, and the grandmother, and of course the son grows up
Yeah.
to be like a script writer and an author, and it's all because his grandmother believed in him, and his grandmother never let him skip, so I want to watch it. There's been a lot of
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of interesting feedback on it. Some people really love it, and some people say, "Oh, it's not really like it is." But yeah, it's interesting. So it sounds
Well,
very similar, like your grandmother played that Glenn Close role in your life.
definitely. It sounds
Yeah.
like it, you know, and my grandmother, she always poured poured so much love into me. You know,
Mm.
she was larger than life in my eyes. And so, you know, whenever I have difficult moments, it's always her memory that I go back to. And that really has been, you know, my saving grace a lot of times up until my son was born. And then he became
Okay,
that,
so fast forward, you're
yeah,
like, you're in Germany, so now you're a mom. So where did you become a mom, and did you have
right.
were
Yeah.
you married, or did you just have a partner, or how did that all happen?
So basically, you know, was bumping my head through life, trying to just do the best that I can.
Figure it
And
out.
yeah, well, in high school, I was a goody two shoes, you know, great student. And I did all that to truly try to get my dad's attention. And he
Mm.
was just never really involved. So I went off to college and, you know, I didn't really deal with the problems that I had growing up. So I made all the mistakes, you know, that you make when you're young and you don't feel loved and you feel abandoned by the
Well,
people who
and
are
you
supposed to care about you.
you don't know any better. A lot of
Yeah,
people aren't very at that age. They're not very self-aware. So were
right.
you still in Germany at this time?
I was not. So I had moved from Germany to Guam.
Mm.
And then from Guam, I traveled kind of all over the place, lived in different places. But I ended up meeting my son's father at the restaurant I was working at. And he was, how can I say, the kind of guy who just everybody loves, which is kind of like my father. He
Mm.
was the kind of guy that was so good to everybody, but you know, behind closed doors, you know, it was a different story, you know. So I ended up married, we ended up getting married, having my son, and you know, I was depressed, to be really honest with you. I call it like postpartum depression, but it wasn't like a normal where you know, a lot of times I think, you know, and I'm no expert, but I believe it's where you really don't want anything to do with the child. But for me, it was opposite. Like I didn't care about anything but my son. I didn't care about my relationship. I didn't care about anything. I didn't care about the house. I didn't care about all these things. The only thing I cared about was providing for him and his well-being. So then that obviously relationship didn't work out because it's really dysfunctional, right? So what ended up happening is I was a single mom, not getting any child support, and really lost, completely lost. And if it wasn't for a community of girlfriends that I had around me who helped me when so I can go to work. And I had my employer at the time. They're still my employer actually. My general manager at the time, he would let me bring my son to work. He worked with me, and you know, I think he came from a family that was equally troublesome, and he had a single mother who raised him. And so he really supported me in my, my single motherhood.
And so were you waiting on tables? You said in the restaurant industry.
I kind of did everything. Mostly what I did was I opened restaurants as like a trainer. I worked
Yeah.
in the kitchen as an expediter. I was never a manager for the company that I'm working at now, just because a manager life does not really work as a single mom in the restaurant industry. So yeah, so that's
So you moved to Guam when your son was how old?
so I actually left Guam. My son has
Okay.
only visited there. So we live in
Oh,
Ohio.
okay.
Yeah, we
Oh,
live in
so you
Ohio.
you met your husband in Guam? Is
I
that
met
was
my husband in
okay.
Ohio.
Oh,
Yeah,
and
I know.
okay.
It's confusing because I've traveled all over the place.
You said you okay. So let me get the story right. Okay. So you lived in Germany with your dad. You moved to live with your grandmother to Guam.
With my grandmother and my dad on Guam.
Okay.
But my
And
father lived in a different house. He made me live
okay.
with my grandmother.
Got it. And then because you were probably
Right.
making trouble with the new wife, right? So that's my guess. So then
I was a goody two shoes. I was very good.
oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. So then you went to college in Ohio. Did you?
I went to college in New York City
Okay. So
originally.
that took you to the States. Okay.
Yes. And then I ended up, which is another,
Okay.
I went to college in New York City, and that was my dream. And then my father didn't want me to go back. So he ended up not doing my financial aid. So I never was able to go back.
Wow.
Yeah. So I eventually ended up in Chicago, went to school in Chicago, and then um, another
Determined.
relationship. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was.
Yeah. I love
But
that.
then, of course, like because of the hole that my dad left in my heart, and I was always trying to search for that
Mm,
loving
yeah.
relationship.
And of
I,
course we go after the person that's very much like our father, like what we know, that's our
right,
comfort zone. And they can be wonderful or they can be not so good, like the people who beat their wives. So yeah, it's so
right,
interesting how that's kind of we take that into the next relationship and into our adult life. So, okay, so you have your son, now you're split up. And so now you, at some point, start to teach yourself about finance and investing.
yes,
And I find that fascinating. So that's not something that comes natural to most people to think, oh,
mhm,
I need to do that. A lot of times we carry our parents' money issues because that's what we've seen. That's what they modeled for us. And so my parents never saved ever.
mhm, right,
And my dad died before they ran out of money, but my mom's still alive and she's in assisted living and she's run completely out of money. Now she does have some good retirement,
mhm,
but it's still not enough to cover her.
yeah,
So, and they had a bumper sticker that they thought was funny. It said, "We're spending our children's inheritance." But it's like they didn't even take care of themselves. And so
right, yeah,
and so that's kind of I remember my mother from a very young age always saying, and they were both in the educational system. So my mom was teacher, then guidance counselor. My dad was a teacher, and then he became a principal or assistant principal.
mhm,
But I remember them because they would get paid once a month in that system. And
hmm,
when it get towards the end of the month, like the like beginning of the fourth week of the month, I just remember my mom going to the grocery store and going around, I don't have enough money. I don't have enough money. We're going to run out of money, and that was like the tapes that play in my head. And it was like teaching me that, hey, just spend everything you have,
right,
while it's
yeah,
there. And then,
yeah,
you'll get more the next month and you spend that. And it was like, that's not a good situation. And now granted, they weren't math teachers. It was like English teacher and history teacher.
mhm,
But
right.
I just wish somebody had sat down with me and taught me how to like manage my money.
Right. So for me, I've come from a family who doesn't, never really had much money. Uh,
Mm,
but I think for me, the reason why I became interested in personal finance was because when I was living with my grandmother, I felt like a charity case, to some extent. Like I remember, I'll never forget, I had one aunt, my grandmother was throwing me a birthday party, which my dad never made any issue. It was always like, he never wanted to do anything special for me. And I'm fine with it now, but at the time I was not. But I overheard my aunt tell my grandmother, because she was planning a party for me. Well, why do we have to throw her a party when her father should be doing it? And so as a child, and you hear that, and it really, it breaks your heart, because you just feel like a burden on everybody at this
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
So, I did have one aunt who was my father's sister, and she managed to make something of her life. And she was a guidance counselor, but she always had, in my mind, she always had a lot of money. She was great with her money. The way I see her now, I would say that she was living a very abundant life at that time. And so she really opened, and she believed in me. And she was the one, I wanted to take tap dancing lessons. And my father was like, no, you can't take tap dancing lessons. And so she went out and bought me tap shoes. And I got a scholarship to take tap dancing lessons because I would show up every single practice with my cousin. And the guy was like, you really need to be in the class. And then I told him, well, my dad will let me. And he said, okay, well, you can take classes for free. And my aunt bought me tap shoes. And so, I saw that she believed in me when really her and my grandmother were the ones that poured that belief into me. And so I think I saw her having abundant mindset.
Yes.
And so that's really started my journey of thinking abundantly.
Yeah.
And
You saw you saw the potential, the possibility, Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and I also had a boyfriend who came from a family that was, my high school sweetheart was from a family of lawyers and judges. He's like, his father was a judge, his grandfather was a judge, his great grandfather was a judge. And so I saw other people having more success, having more wealth. And then, when you start searching your soul and you start facing your own demons, you have to grapple with the fact that these people aren't really any different than you. And so when I started raising my son, and I feel broke. I'm broke. I feel broken. But then I was very cognizant of the fact that my thinking wasn't getting me anywhere, and that I need to change the way I think in order to change my life. And even if I couldn't do that for myself right now, I would speak that to him so that he wasn't raised with that limited mindset. So with him,
it's like you didn't want, I think I don't know if there was a specific turning point where you heard something or saw somebody speak, but it's clear to me that you had to do it for him in your mind because you knew that you wanted something better for him. And we often do that, I think, as parents. We won't change our behavior until we know it's going to impact our kids.
Right. And so that's really what it was. But I remember even when he was 2, 3, like even though I was broke, I didn't have, I had to rely on friends in order to watch him because I couldn't afford childcare. Like I never spoke words of lack. I never spoke words of things were not possible. If we couldn't afford something, I would say, okay, well, how can we afford this? Like, how can we make this happen? And even if I didn't 100% believe it, I said it because, I was kind of like going through the motions of saying it because I knew that that's what you're supposed to do.
That's great.
And then
I wish more people were like that. I wish, yeah, that's amazing.
At some point, I had to internalize it though, because your child, they know when you're not being authentic. And so I had to own up to the fact that I was not, like my life wasn't what I was preaching. And so I finally got to the point where I'm like, I'm done. I'm fed up. I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, and we're just going to figure this out. And so I went out and I got my investment license. I got my insurance license. And I started teaching him all the things that I was learning. And so I would sit down with families and help with their finances, like giving them advice. And I had to find a way to educate them at their level. So to simplify it. And so I started simplifying it for my son. So from a young age, he started learning about compound interest. He started learning about dollar cost averaging. And so now he's at the point where I think he's in a great spot, like he
Yeah.
makes great financial choices.
Yeah.
But
So,
yeah, that's
so,
how I
so,
started.
yeah. So I remember, I don't know how long ago it was, but we first communicated in a Facebook group. So, because I went back and looked at the messages, and I could, it was outside of the message box. So, but I think it was like 6 months ago, and because I was looking for people to be guests, and I remember your story, and I have a spreadsheet, so I had like copied it in there. And so when I was ready to book some more guests and I was looking back through my spreadsheet, I saw that you had said that you were in the process of making a big pivot in your life, which was one of the reasons I wanted to wait a little while. But
Yeah.
I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how exciting you're getting ready to launch this podcast called
Mhm.
Skipping the Lunch Line, or
It's
is
called
that
skipping lunch lines. Yeah.
like skipping lunch lines? And I'd love to get, like, let's talk about that, because you're gonna launch it in January. I think it's exciting. And so just tell me a little bit about where that came from and what you're gonna do with it and how that's gonna play out.
Yeah. So skipping lunch lines originally started as a different podcast. It was called Wealth Impact Nation Win. And it was going to be mostly focused on just financial literacy. But then what I did is I went out and did some market research. I went and interviewed a bunch of teenagers, and I left it kind of open ended. I said, okay, what are the problems that you're dealing with? What things are on your mind right now? And very few of them said that they're concerned about financial literacy. And it's not that they don't care about that, but that's not the problems that they identify in their life. And so, my little foray into internet marketing, right? And they say, okay, you got to figure out what people want, and then you sell them what they want. So I'm like, so I'm very passionate about financial literacy, but
For teens, though, right? Specifically,
um,
or anybody?
specifically for teens,
Hmm.
because I think growing up, like, and my issues that I had as a teen, like I feel really connected to the younger generation. And I feel like it's my mission to really set out and set them up for success a lot better than I was. But yeah, that's how it kind of started, was this idea that I want to impact them in their financial literacy. But when it came down to it, that's not where they're at right now. And so I said, okay, let me answer the question of the problems that they're facing right now, and on the back end, I'm going to serve them a financial literacy piece.
Yeah,
So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's interesting because your situation reminds me of somebody else that I know in the BBD community. Uh,
mhm.
and so she has a program, and she started out with a program that was for softball players.
Oh
She's
wow,
a
okay.
teacher slash coach, softball
Mhm.
coach, very, very passionate about it. And so she was selling her program to teenagers on, kind of like how to, it's getting in the zone of that game. It's
Yeah,
like when you have the perfect game, and so many people, they fail, but it's usually the mental game they fail at. But
right.
what she learned, and this could be the twist for you as well, what she learned is that she needed to market to the parents of the
Mhm.
children, because number one, they're the ones that are going to pay for the program, and number two, can you think about all the parents who are sitting on that sideline watching their kids struggle and wanting
Yeah,
them to have that perfect game? And so it's
yeah,
kind of like they go into this program together, and it seems like that would be a really good way for you, because you can help some adults too, and they could learn together.
definitely.
Yeah.
Well, and that's exactly, my story with my son is that him and I learned together. I was very
Yeah.
open and honest with him about, once he was at that age where I could tell him like, hey, you know, this is where we're at, but look at all these other people who are successful, and they're not any different than we are. They're not better than we are. They're not,
Yeah.
you know, so it's just an access of information
Yeah.
is what it
You're
is.
and you could actually market it as, don't you want your kid to be able to take care of you in your old age?
Well, you know, and that's one
Yeah.
thing that I kind of, you know, when I was doing my market research and I was asking these kids, like their number one concern is they don't see a path forward with what's going on right now in the world.
Mm,
And so for me, that's huge, you know, like
yeah.
the whole generation that feels lost right now. And so, you know, with the COVID and the student loans, like, you know, there's trillions of dollars in student loan debt and parents can't save for retirement and all those things, that's all compounding on the next generation. And they're the ones that have to solve all our problems. So, you know, I still believe in college is great for most people, for a lot of people, but it's not right for everybody. And so I just
Sure.
want to have conversations about how can we prepare kids better, and if college is the route that they're going to go through, how can we set them up so that they're not financially devastated on the back end,
Yeah.
and, you know, get them through that college experience.
Or
With
even
the,
how, like, maybe their parents aren't even able to afford college, but how they could help fund through what they learn from you a college
right,
education. And yeah,
right.
that's awesome.
So kind of what my big idea, my dream is to go ahead and have a program where kids are learning what it is that they need to learn, like the things that we always say, why didn't I learn that in school, right? We all say that they should be learning finance, they should be learning about how to make, um, build community, how to network, all these things that they shouldn't learn, that we say that they should have learned in school. Well,
Hmm.
why can't we teach them?
Yeah. You know
We
what I
have the
love
time.
about, I love about you and your story is that, so you're kind of figuring it out. And it's
Yeah,
like, yeah, and you, like you said, you're ever evolving, and we do, but like, you have a dream already. You have a deeper purpose that you've discovered before, like, so many people wait until the nest empties because they sink
right, yeah,
everything in to their child and they don't think about themselves. And I mean, it's funny how it worked for you, because you were sinking everything into your child, but through that process and what you wanted for him became your deeper purpose.
right. You know
Eh,
what? Because you know what I found in pouring so much into him, and then having to grasp with the fact that, you know, I'm trying to teach him to love himself. I'm trying to teach him that he has value and he has worth and that he has a purpose in this earth. Well, you can't tell your child this if you're not recognizing your own purpose, your own value, your own love for yourself. So then I
mhm,
had to, you know, so it's been, I call it like the Phoenix, my Phoenix process of
mhm.
breaking down, breaking everything, falling apart in order to rise again. So it's been ugly. You know, there's been moments that were ugly, but you know, I'm at that point now where I can see how beautiful the future is,
Oh,
because I have come to accept the parts of me that were broken and the parts of me that failed and all the things that all the dreams that I didn't realize and all the things that I didn't do. There's time, you know, as long as there's breath, there's time. And
yes.
so I'm
Yes.
still figuring it out. Absolutely, I'm figuring it out. But that's part of the beauty of it, is that we don't have to have it all figured out today.
Yeah, but you have this inkling. Actually, it's more than an inkling, and you
Mhm.
have this. It's like a mission. It's like
Yeah,
you have this mission, and when you
mhm.
have a mission, nothing can stop you from going forward and making those. It's making mistakes, right? But
Right.
it's learning. It's learning as you go, and I love that, because you're not afraid when you have a mission. That kind of fear vanishes. And it's so funny because I tell, like, in my workshops, I often say, would you want your child to not go after what they love, what
Yeah.
lights them up, and but yet you're accepting that for yourself? And so I love your example, and I love that you just conquered all those demons pretty much on your own at a very young age. I mean, you're 47, you're younger than a lot of people that I work with, and you're younger than probably a lot of my audience, because I think a lot my audience is mostly 50 and up. So you, yes, have, so look, think by the time you get to be 50, Look at what you'll have accomplished. And you had
Well,
him young, so you're going to be a very young getting out there as an empty nester. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. I mean, it's weird because I'm at this point where I'm 47 and I just discovered human design. Do you
I
know
have
anything
not
about
gotten
human
into
design?
that, but I did see a post that you did about it, and I thought that was interesting. Made me a perked
Well,
my interest. I was like, I need to look into that.
well, I've never been into that kind of stuff, but like I kind of somebody who I trust was totally into it. So I said, "Hell, let me just take a look at this." And I'm kind of blown away because and I'm so new to it, so I probably shouldn't really be explaining anything about it. But according to what I read about myself, this from the age of 50 on is supposed to be my wisdom years. And
Ooh,
so for the type of person that I am, you have like 3 phases in your life. And so the first phase is, completely breaking down. The second one is finding yourself. And then the third one is standing in your authority, basically. And
cool.
so I feel like alive. I'm like, oh, my best years are right around the corner. I got 3 years.
Well, I'm really excited because, after yesterday when we had that, I think it was some kind of eclipse when Jupiter and Saturn got really, really
Yeah.
close. In fact, the guy on the TV said they're 450 miles apart. And I said to my husband, 450 miles? That's really close out there. And then he came back on and he said, oh, I'm sorry, it's 450 million miles. But
That's
we
funny.
just entered the age of Aquarius, and I'm an
I know.
Aquarius for 20 years.
This
Yeah.
is your time too. So.
Yeah. I don't know what it means, but I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was having that discussion with my son earlier today, and he's not into any woo-woo stuff. He's like, "Mommy, that stuff isn't real." And
Oh,
I said, "You may not think so now, but
yeah.
there's still hope for you in the future." I
Yeah,
mean,
you need him to like teach him a little bit of manifesting and then he'll believe. My granddaughter,
oh
my
yeah.
oldest granddaughter, she has manifested big time. She manifested a baby sister even.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah,
Well, I talked to him about that.
her daddy was had an appointment to he's
Oh, gotcha.
yes. And my daughter they were done and she wrote in on a note and folded it up and put it under a crystal. My daughter she does crystal stuff.
That's awesome.
And yeah, and she found it and then she got pregnant. Isn't that crazy? That's crazy. So
No, wow.
anyways, okay, so we need to wrap up. This has been delightful. So what do you want if you had one thing to say to the people listening to leave them with, what would that one thing be?
That you have magnificence in you, and you have, if you're a listener of this podcast, you have a whole wealth of life experience that the world needs right now. The world's hurting and it needs the wisdom of us and the older generation. But in order to do that, we really need to tap into the younger generation and really show them the way. But in order to do that, we have to do it for ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what you said struck me because when you say the world needs you and needs that wisdom, well,
Mhm.
when you're putting your wisdom out there and helping others with it, you have a higher vibration that high energy like resonates.
Yes,
So the world receives that. Right? So
we need that. We need
yes,
that.
yes. That's what that means. I know you get that and I know that's what you mean, but like I wanted to like really put it out there that when you vibrate from a higher energy because you are doing something that is like mission based with deeper purpose. Yeah, if everybody could just get to that place, it would be so different. Yes. So
Absolutely.
different. Well, thanks, Dara. It was wonderful getting to know you and like congratulations on living your best life.
Thank you so much. And honestly, I thank you for this opportunity. Like I said, I'm still in my Phoenix process,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
but I feel
And I think
very.
you're a wonderful mom. I think your son's very lucky to have somebody who's like so self aware. Yeah. All right. Take care.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Not Your Average Lives podcast. If you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe on iTunes if you have an Apple device. You can find free resources and learn what else I have going on at the moment that might interest you on my website at notyouraveragegrandma.com. You can also find me on Instagram or Facebook at Not Your Average Grandma. If you liked this episode, it would make my heart so happy if you could leave me a 5-star rating. You can also add a review to let me know what you like about this podcast, which will help spread the word about it to others who need a little midlife inspiration. As always, be you, listen to your inner voice, and focus on reigniting that lost spark so you can start living your own, not your average life.